I didn't mean to notice her like that. It just happened, like a slip of attention that refused to correct itself. It was a Wednesday, slow and gray, the kind that makes the light in the repair shop turn the color of dust. I was behind the counter, sleeves rolled, oil still under my nails, when she walked in. Not hurried, not uncertain, just present. She carried herself like she'd already decided not to care what anyone thought. Shoulders straight, voice even, eyes scanning the room like she was measuring it against something only she knew. Her car had stalled 2 blocks down, she said. The silver one with the dented mirror. I nodded, tried to look professional, and immediately fumbled the wrench in my hand. It clattered to the floor. She smiled, barely, but it reached her eyes, a quiet spark that didn't fade as quickly as it should have. I told her I'd take a look, walked outside, and the world suddenly felt smaller. The air had that faint bite of burnt rubber and rain about to start. She followed a few steps behind, close enough that I could hear the click of her boots on the wet pavement. No perfume, just that clean, unplaceable scent of someone who's been moving through the world a long time. The hood creaked open. I leaned in, pretending to study the engine, but my mind was miles away. There was something different about her presence, like she occupied silence instead of trying to fill it. Most people talk too much when things go wrong. She didn't. She stood beside me, hands tucked into her coat pockets, gaze fixed somewhere beyond the horizon. After a while, she said quietly, "You're young to be running a place like this." I glanced up. Someone's got to keep the old things working. Her mouth curved. Not quite a smile, more like a thought she decided not to say aloud. The car problem was nothing, just a loose cable. 10 minutes, maybe. But the silence between us stretched longer than that, filled with small sounds, metal tapping metal, the low hum of passing cars, her steady breathing. When I closed the hood and turned to hand her the keys, she was already watching me. Not in that way people look when they're being polite, but like she was searching for something she half recognized. For a second, I forgot to speak. Her eyes, gray, maybe green, caught the light just right, and everything else in the lot blurred out. Then she said, "Thank you," and reached into her purse. I shook my head. "Don't worry about it. It was nothing." Her hand paused midair. She studied me, curious, maybe a little wary. "You're sure?" "Yeah. Call it a favor." Her laugh was quiet, low. "That's dangerous. Favors have a way of coming back." She said it lightly, but there was weight behind it, like someone who'd learned that lesson the hard way. Before I could think of something clever, or even human, to say back, she was already walking toward her car. I caught myself watching the way she brushed a strand of hair from her face before opening the door. She didn't look back, but as the car pulled away, she glanced once in the rearview mirror, just long enough that I knew she saw me still standing there. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that she was just being polite, that I'd forget about it by the time the next customer came in. But when I closed up that evening, the air still smelled faintly of rain and motor oil, and all I could see were her eyes, steady, unreadable, and saying everything she hadn't. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see her. I saw her again 3 days later. She was standing by the counter, that same silver car parked outside, one hand wrapped around a paper cup that had long gone cold. I was wiping grease off my hands when she looked up, like she wasn't sure if she should say something first or wait for me to. "You said you fixed it," she said, and I couldn't tell if she was joking or accusing. "I did. Probably something else this time." She gave a small nod, her lips twitching like she was suppressing a smile. Or maybe it's just me. There it was again, something under the surface of her tone. Not self-pity exactly, but a tiredness that had nothing to do with engines or cables. While I checked under the hood again, she leaned against the workbench. Her coat was draped over the stool beside her, and the rolled-up sleeves of her shirt revealed wrists marked faintly by the edge of a watch she must have worn every day for years. She looked like someone who used to rush everywhere and had finally learned to slow down, though maybe not by choice. We didn't talk much. She asked about tools, the kind of questions people ask just to fill the air. I answered in short sentences, but every time she looked at me, I felt like there was something I was supposed to understand and hadn't yet earned the right to. At one point, she ran her fingers along a row of spare keys hanging on the wall, lightly, almost absent-mindedly. The gesture shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. There was something about the way her touch lingered, the way she stared at the metal reflections like they reminded her of something she couldn't say out loud. I caught myself watching her hands, steady but tense, like they were used to holding too much and letting go too little. When I finished tightening the last bolt, she said softly, "You must get tired of people breaking things and expecting you to fix them." The words hit differently. Not teasing, not casual. Something else. Only when it's the same thing over and over. I said before I could stop myself. She looked at me for a long time, and for the first time since I'd met her, she didn't seem sure of herself. Her eyes darted away, her jaw tightened, just slightly. It was gone in a second, but the crack in her composure stayed with me. Outside, the light had turned gold. The kind of glow that made everything look softer, even her. She handed me the payment, her fingers brushing mine for a fraction of a second too long. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "You shouldn't look at people that way." I wanted to ask what she meant, but by the time I found the words, she was already walking out, her reflection moving through the dusty window. The engine started fine this time, but I stood there long after she drove away, the echo of her voice mixing with the hum of the fluorescent lights, quiet, electric, and impossible to forget. The rain started just before closing time. One of those sudden downpours that turned the streets into mirrors. She called ahead, said the car was fine, but her wipers weren't, and asked if I was still around. I told her I was, though I'd been planning to leave 10 minutes earlier. When she arrived, the shop lights flickered against the wet glass, painting everything in slow-moving reflections. She stepped inside, shaking off the rain from her hair, water catching on the collar of her coat. "Didn't mean to bother you this late," she said, voice softer than usual. "It's fine," I told her. "Gives me something to do." She smiled at that, but it was tired. The kind of smile that doesn't last long enough to convince either person. I worked on the wipers while she sat on the stool, watching the rain streak down the window. We didn't speak much. The silence wasn't awkward this time, just dense, like something fragile lived in it. At one point, thunder cracked overhead, and she flinched. A small thing, almost invisible, but I caught it. She let out a shaky laugh. "I used to love storms. Not so much anymore." "Why?" I asked, though I shouldn't have. She hesitated, eyes fixed on the dark outside. "You ever notice how quiet things get right after lightning? Like the world's waiting for something to break." I didn't answer. I just nodded, and for a second, neither of us breathed. The wipers were fixed in minutes, but I didn't tell her. I couldn't. There was something about the way she sat there, hands clasped, shoulders drawn in, that made it feel wrong to end the moment. So I found excuses. Checked the seals twice. Adjusted a bolt that didn't need adjusting. Watched her reflection in the glass instead of her directly. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. A man's name flashed on the screen. She looked at it, expression unreadable, and turned it face down without answering. The movement was calm, practiced. Too practiced. "You can answer it," I said, even though part of me didn't want her to. She shook her head. "It's nothing." The air thickened. I could feel my pulse in my palms, absurdly loud. I tried to focus on the sound of the rain, the faint tick of cooling metal, anything but the fact that she was only a few feet away. When I finally stepped back from the hood, she stood too. Closer than before. She smelled faintly of rain and something warm, familiar, like cedar. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, everything else stopped. The rain, the noise, the distance. I saw her start to say something, then change her mind. Her lips parted, then closed again. She took a small step back, folding her arms like she needed to keep herself from reaching out. "I should go," she said quietly. "Yeah," I murmured, though I didn't move. Her hand brushed mine as she reached for the keys. An accident, maybe, but it felt deliberate. A brief, electric contact that left the air between us charged. She opened the door, paused, looked back once. "You should lock up soon," she said, though her tone sounded more like a warning than advice. And then she was gone, leaving the rain and the hum of fluorescent light, and the unfinished sentence she'd almost said still hanging in the air. It had been a week since the storm, and I'd convinced myself it was over, that whatever had passed between us had dissolved with the rain. But then she showed up again, late in the afternoon, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled, asking if I could help her move a few boxes from the back room. It wasn't really my job, but I said yes before she even finished the sentence. The storage room was small and dim, smelling faintly of cardboard and dust. The kind of place where sound doesn't travel far. She stood by the shelves, giving instructions with a careful sort of distance, like she was afraid to touch the air between us. We worked in near silence, boxes sliding, tape peeling, the hum of the ceiling fan trembling above us. I could feel her behind me as I lifted one of the heavier crates, the soft shift of her breathing too close, too careful. When I turned to pass it over, our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away right away. That moment stretched. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, then dropped to the floor. "Don't," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything. You were about to." The words landed heavier than they should have. She stepped back, pressing her hand to her forehead. "This isn't," she stopped, exhaled. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Maybe not," I said. "But you do. And you're still here." Her mouth parted, ready to argue, but no sound came out. The silence between us grew thick again, this time not peaceful, but charged, uneven. I watched her struggle to find her composure, her fingers tightening around the edge of a box. "You're too young to get caught in someone else's mess," she said, her voice low, almost trembling. I almost laughed. "You think that's what this is?" "What else could it be?" she asked, but it wasn't a challenge. It was exhaustion, the kind that comes from trying not to feel something you already do. I wanted to reach out, to steady her hand, to tell her she didn't have to keep pretending this was just coincidence. But I didn't. I stood there, heart pounding, watching her stare at the wall like it could offer her an escape. The air buzzed with everything we hadn't said. Finally, she spoke again, almost a whisper. "You have to stop looking at me like that." "I've tried," I said. "It doesn't work." Her breath caught. For a second, her eyes softened, something unguarded flickering through before she forced it away. She shook her head, half smiling, half breaking. "This can't go anywhere," she said. "I know." She stepped closer then, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin, the hesitation radiating off her like heat. Her voice was barely a thread when she said it. "Then why does it already feel like it has?" I didn't see her for a while after that day in the storage room. The quiet felt heavier than it should have. Every time the door opened, I half expected it to be her, until it wasn't. I told myself it was better that way. Clean breaks, no explanations. But the mind doesn't like unfinished stories. Then one evening, when the light was starting to fade, she appeared again. No warning, no small talk, just her, standing in the doorway, holding an old envelope in her hand. "Can I sit?" she asked. I nodded. The shop was empty, the air still and warm. She sat on the stool she always chose, the one by the window, and placed the envelope on the counter. It was worn, the corners soft, the flap sealed but yellowed with time. "I wasn't planning to come," she said, "but I found this today." I waited. She didn't look at me when she spoke next. "It's a letter," she said quietly, "from someone I used to love. He sent it the week before he died." I never opened it. My throat tightened. Why not? Because I already knew what it would say. She smiled faintly, bitterly. "Sorry. Forgive me." The usual ghosts. She slid the letter toward me, but didn't let go of it. "You remind me of him sometimes," she said. "The way you listen. The way you don't try to fix what can't be fixed." I didn't know what to say. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the clock, ordinary sounds, suddenly too loud. She looked down at her hands. They trembled a little. He was younger too. I told myself I was helping him. Turns out, he was the one saving me from something I didn't know I'd lost. The words hung there, soft and raw. "I'm not him," I said finally. "I know." She nodded slowly. "That's what makes it harder." The quiet that followed wasn't empty this time. It was full of things we didn't want to name, grief, memory, guilt, all tangled together. Then she did something unexpected. She opened the envelope, unfolded the single sheet inside, and read in silence. Her eyes moved across the page once, twice. No tears, just stillness. When she looked up, something in her expression had changed. Not lighter, not sadder, just resolved. She tore the letter neatly in half. Then again. The pieces lay scattered on the counter like pale leaves. "It's time," she said softly, almost to herself. I wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't. The restraint hurt more than anything else. She looked at me, a quiet steadiness in her eyes now. "You should go home," she said, "before this turns into something we can't take back." I nodded, but couldn't move. Because in that moment, between the torn paper and the fading light, I realized she wasn't trying to push me away. She was trying to save me from the version of her that never healed. She came by near closing again. No car trouble this time. No excuse. Just a quiet knock on the glass and a small, hesitant wave when I looked up. I unlocked the door without a word. She stepped inside, and the smell of evening rain followed her. The air between us felt thinner now, stripped of all the polite barriers we'd kept standing for too long. She didn't sit. She just leaned against the counter, eyes tracing the grease-stained floor. "I didn't know where else to go," she said finally. I nodded, though she hadn't really asked anything. "You don't have to explain." "I do," she said, her voice almost breaking on the word. "Because I've spent half my life not explaining. I just move on. Pretend I don't notice what I lose in the process." The hum of the shop lights filled the silence that followed. I could hear the rain starting up again, light, uncertain, like even the weather was tired of choosing sides. "You didn't lose everything," I said quietly. She looked up then. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but there was something alive in them, something raw and unguarded. "Maybe not," she said, "but I lost the part of me that believed things could still surprise me." I took a small step closer, slow enough that she could stop me if she wanted. She didn't. Her hands were resting on the counter, fingers tracing invisible circles on the surface. I placed my hand beside hers, not touching, just close enough that the warmth bridged the space. We stood like that for a while, the kind of silence that feels like breathing the same air. Finally, she said, "This is wrong, you know." "Probably," I answered, "and you'll regret it." "Maybe." She exhaled a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sigh. "You're supposed to argue with me. I'm tired of arguing with things that already make sense." Her head tilted, eyes searching mine, as if trying to find the version of herself she used to be somewhere in the reflection. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," I said. "It's just real." Something in her softened then, a quiet surrender, not dramatic, not cinematic, just human. She reached up, brushed her fingers along my sleeve, and left them there, trembling slightly. For a moment, it felt like we both stopped pretending that this was temporary, that we hadn't already fallen into something neither of us planned for. She leaned her forehead against mine. Not a kiss, just a shared exhale, two lives collapsing into stillness. "I don't know what happens after this," she whispered. "Neither do I." Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle, the shop lights flickering once before settling into a steady glow. We stayed there, unmoving, holding nothing and everything at once. And for the first time, silence didn't feel like the thing between us. It felt like the thing keeping us together. It's strange, looking back now, how quiet that night really was. No music, no promises, just the faint hum of the shop lights and the soft rhythm of the rain fading outside. We never talked about what happened after. Not in the way people expect. No declarations. No plans. Just the quiet understanding that something had shifted and neither of us could return to who we'd been before. I still see her sometimes, though not the way I used to. She'll stop by once in a while, usually in daylight now. Always with that calm steadiness, but lighter somehow. Like she finally learned how to breathe again. We talk about ordinary things. How business has been. How the weather can't decide what it wants. There's no trace of tension anymore, but every word carries an echo of the silence we once shared. That silence still means something. It always will. I used to think love was something that announced itself loudly. Something you could name and claim. But now I know it can live in smaller places. A look that lingers too long. The way two hands hover close but never meet. The pause before someone says goodbye and doesn't. She once told me she'd stopped believing people could surprise her. Maybe that's what we were, two surprises that arrived too late and left just in time. Sometimes, when I close up the shop at night, I catch myself waiting for the faint knock on the glass. Not because I expect her to be there, but because part of me still listens for it. That's how I know it was real. I don't think we ever fell in love, not in the way the movies show it. We just saw each other, completely. And sometimes, that's rarer than love. Now, when I think of her, I don't feel the ache anymore. Just a kind of quiet gratitude. For what we almost were, for what we couldn't be, and for the strange, tender truth that some connections aren't meant to last. They're meant to wake something in you. Remind you that you're still capable of feeling deeply, even if it hurts. And maybe that's enough. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?